Hey, it's a Saturday Hodgepodge. Been a while since I did one of these. Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome back to Saturday Hodgepodge. This is my semi-weekly now show or video in which I talk about books, my reading, booktube stuff sometimes, anything I want to talk about. Today I want to give you my nonfiction November TBR, Pile of Possibilities, talk a little bit more about the situation in Gaza, which I made an entire video addressing, and I have new, perhaps more informed thoughts about that at this point. And then, just talk just a little bit about music. Should go relatively quickly. So I have a TBR and a pile of possibilities for nonfiction November this year. In part, I have a TBR because I've already started two books. So the first book I started is The Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward. I'm planning on reading Ward's new novel, Let Us Descend, in December. But for nonfiction November, I thought I would read The Men We Reaped. I've had this on my Kindle for a little while, and I've already started it. I'm about 50 pages in, and it's really good. Kind of a memoir of men that Jesmyn Ward knew in the town where she grew up, and family members who died or were killed or who died from drug-related incidents. And I really think that some of the writing in these first few pages, these first 50 or so pages of The Men We Reaped, is some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read from Jesmyn Ward, and it's really powerful. So I'm for sure reading that. I also, for whatever reason, decided I wanted to read some Civil War history. It's been a long time since I took a class in the Civil War in graduate school. So I thought I would read James McPherson's one-volume Battle Cry of Freedom. It is, I think, it won the Pulitzer Prize, and I think it's pretty well considered to be one of the best one-volume histories of the Civil War. And right now, I've read about 30 or 40 pages. It's mostly about kind of setting the stage for what the United States was like leading up to when the Civil War began. I used to teach a class in American history that went from, indigenous America all the way up through the American Civil War. So this is, for me, is fairly well trodden ground, but it's nice to know that, I was teaching things that, a distinguished historian like McPherson also included in their book. So in lots of ways, review. It's not that I'm not learning anything new, but it's review. This book is around 700 pages. I'm not sure I'm going to finish it because I'm not sure how much of a review of these things I need. Right now, it's a lot of kind of the history I taught, like I was saying, leading up to the American Civil War. And really what I was interested most in is the Civil War itself. So, that's eventually going to come, but I need a little less of a reminder, a refresher on the United States and the situation it was in before the Civil War than I do on the war itself. And that's kind of how I was reading it. So we'll see. And if I get to a point where I think, okay, I've read enough, I feel like I've gone over enough Civil War history again, then I might stop. Some of the books on my TBR then, or my pile of possibilities, are going to sound familiar because I think I hold them up every time I talk about reading nonfiction. I know that's true of Stacy Schiff's biography called Vera. This is a novel about, this is a biography of Vladimir Nabokov's wife and the things she did that essentially contributed to his success and his ability to work as a writer. I want to read this because I'm thinking that my next writing project might have something to do with the wife of a writer in the 1920s. So this would be kind of a good way of looking at how, a renowned and biographer I respect kind of approached a similar subject. You may remember that when I went to Scotland, I went to Leakey's bookshop in Inverness, and I picked up a copy of a biography of Robert Burns, the Scottish poet, and it is called Robert Burns, The Tender Heart by Hugh Douglas. And this looks like it's right about in the page, in number of pages, around 300 pages, that I feel most comfortable reading books in. And it is something I'm interested in, not necessarily just about the life of Robert Burns, but about Scotland during the time period. Another book I know I've held up for Nonfiction November is Fault Lines, and this is by historians Kevin Cruz and Julian Zelizer. This is a history of the United States since 1974. And that's something I'm really interested in, how historians deal with kind of more modern historical events, how we interpret those, what lessons we draw from those. And so I'm interested in reading it, but with things going on right now, I'm not sure that's something I want to get into. Another book that I know I've mentioned is Pekka Hämäläinen's Indigenous Continent. This is a history of the indigenous population of North America, at the very least, before colonization, before English colonization, etc. And I'm really interested in that subject. I do read quite a bit by indigenous authors and about indigenous American history. Hämäläinen is not indigenous, but I did enjoy his book, Lakota Empire, Lakota Nation, which is about the Lakota people. And then finally, a book I picked up at some point, I'm not exactly sure where, is Warriors of God, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, the Third Crusade. For some reason, I've been having this kind of feeling about reading about the Crusades. This is only about the Third Crusade, but involves some of the more famous people involved in the Crusades. And so I'm thinking about that. And then also I have The Hollow Crown by Miri Rubin, which is kind of a history. It says a history of Britain in the late Middle Ages, I think leading up to Tudor succession, the War of the Roses, that kind of thing. And, strangely, I find English history sometimes, or just history, medieval, Renaissance history, to be kind of a comfort read thing for me. And so I'm seriously thinking about that. But those are all just kind of pile of possibilities things. It's possible I'll get to none of them. It's possible I get to all of them, even though that's a lot less possible. But that's what I'm thinking about reading for Nonfiction November. I'm not sure how that lines up with the prompts. Get back with me for my Nonfiction November wrap up, and I'll tell you that. So the other thing I want to talk about is I do want to talk about the war in Gaza that is going on at this point. The last time I made a video about this, I did my best to kind of give my perspective as an American who is concerned about what's going on there. It's important to know that as an American, I'm talking about this as an outsider, but an outsider from a country who lived through a horrible terrorist attack, and then I think largely did all the wrong things in response to that. So I wanted to talk about that just really briefly. The war's been going on, I think, around 3 weeks now, since October the 7th. That's a little more than 3 weeks, isn't it? Since the brutal, barbaric, horrible attacks that Hamas launched against Israel that killed thousands of Israeli citizens, kidnapped hundreds of others. That act of terror was shocking, and I think it kind of jolted people in the United States back into an awareness that terrorism hasn't necessarily gone anywhere. And I think that kind of explains America's initial reaction to what was going on, to go into our pro-Israel, Israel is our most important ally in the region mode, which happened relatively quickly. Since then, what we've seen is, particularly over the last couple of weeks, even though it's not been in the news as often, we've seen an escalation of Israeli attacks, bombing, raids into Gaza, and an increasing number of civilian casualties as a result of that. Israel ordered Palestinians to move from the region where they thought they were going to be launching their ground offensive. And as far as I can tell, hundreds of thousands of people probably did, but not all are capable of getting out. There was the story that is largely now believed to be false, that Israel had bombed one of the hospitals in Gaza, which now appears to have been a terrorist rocket launched by a group associated with or affiliated with Hamas, which went wrong. But we have seen just in recent days that Israel has actually taken credit for bombing a Palestinian refugee camp in Gaza, because they said, I think the leader of Hamas was there, and they believe they killed him, but in the process they killed civilians. And this is really kind of what I want to talk about and what I want to focus on, because if you can tell from my thumbnail, what I want right now is a ceasefire. That's what I think is the best thing. And one reason why I think it's the best thing is that regardless of which side of the aisle you want to count yourself on, and I don't think there is a right side. I'm going to say that. There's not a right side between Palestinians and Israelis. No matter which side you think you're on, I think what we see happening is that the forces on both sides that we probably oppose the most, that being Hamas and, let's say, the more far right elements of the Israeli government, they are getting what they want. Hamas attacked Israel knowing Israel would attack Gaza, knowing they would inflict heavy casualties on the Palestinian people, and they did not care. They're willing to sacrifice Palestinian lives to achieve their goal, and the goal of Hamas is the elimination of the state of Israel, as well as Iran's. And so undoubtedly, I think what Hamas thought was if they could pull off this attack, Israel would attack with such force in such a way that it might lead to a wider war, which would lead to perhaps the destruction of Israel. And as such, in a way, they're getting what they want. But Israeli forces, particularly Israeli political forces led by Netanyahu, which I'm going to characterize as being fairly militantly right-wing forces in Israel, also are getting what they want. What they wanted was the excuse to try to destroy Hamas and to be able to take the gloves off in doing so. And Hamas has provided them that. And so I think the Israeli government in its war against Hamas is getting what they want. And I'm not suggesting any kind of conspiracy in which Netanyahu let this happen so he could gain political advantage from it. But I do think he's trying to take a political advantage, military advantage of that situation right now, while the world still has memories of October 7th in their mind and believes that Israel is justified. He's going to carry these things out. And the reason why I'm advocating for a ceasefire, while I believe that's the right step, is people are dying. Innocent people are dying. But more specifically, it's because the people who are paying the price now are Palestinians. Hamas leaders and fighters may be being killed, but they're being killed alongside Palestinian citizens who really don't have any control over Hamas. I know every time there's one of these attacks, we see Palestinians turning out to celebrate and things like that, but that's not all Palestinians. Okay? They can't all possibly support Hamas because they're not stupid. They know that Hamas is part of the reason why these things happen to them. They know that. They know this would be the response, and I think most Palestinians would not support Hamas attacks for that reason. But Hamas, by embedding itself in civilian populations, indicates it doesn't care anything about the lives of Palestinians. Israel, by blowing up a refugee camp and other places where they know they're Palestine civilians, are indicating that they value their military goals above the lives of innocent Palestinians. And so there's nobody in a position of power who's really doing anything about the situation for Palestinians who have done nothing wrong. That is the average Palestinian citizen, child, woman, man, whatever, who's not in Hamas, who doesn't support that kind of thing and just wants peace and a chance to get on with their life. Those are the people who don't have anybody representing them. And they can't as long as this violence goes on. And so, I believe in a ceasefire. What I hope President Biden is doing is pushing as hard as he can without breaking that tie he has to Netanyahu, which I wish he didn't have. I wish, there were a different leader in Israel right now. I wish that, a lot, but there's not. I hope he's pushing for some kind of a ceasefire to happen soon. I know he pushed for sending humanitarian aid into Gaza. You may not know this, but since 2021, under Biden's leadership, the United States has sent hundreds of millions of dollars in humanitarian aid and economic assistance into Gaza and to the Palestinian people. There is that connection. And so what I'm hoping is that Biden is still working within the framework of this support. Now, a lot of people criticize Biden and are criticizing Biden now for standing by Israel, but I'll just point something out. And this is an unfortunate geopolitical reality, and it's part of the tragedy of what's happening to the people of Palestine, that if the United States showed any less resolve in supporting Israel, then the likelihood of a wider conflict would actually increase. And that wider conflict would not be good for the people in Gaza. It would not be good for Palestinians in the West Bank. It would not be good for the people of Israel or Lebanon or Syria or Iran or anywhere else. That would be bad if the war expands. And so, the only way I think President Biden saw that he'd try to stop that was through a show of force and a show of support for Israel. Feel free to disagree with that if you want to, but I think that is the geopolitical reality of the situation. But the reality situation now should be focusing on the tragedy, the injustice that's happening to the average Palestinian citizen right now, who's not in Hamas, who's not a terrorist, who does not want to eliminate and destroy Israel. That's where our concern should lie, and that's why I support a ceasefire. So off of the politics and then on to something just really random. One of the things I talk about here on my channel every once in a while has to do with music, and I was surprised to find out that a song that I had not known was a cover for most of my life, at least since the 90s, was in fact a cover. You may have heard this recently too. It seems to be more well known than I thought, but that is the song Torn. Now, in the early 90s, mid 90s, an Australian singer or actress named Natalie Imbruglia, I believe that's her name, recorded a version of Torn, which became a really big hit. But I didn't know that that was a cover. And it is the cover of a song by a band called Ednaswap, who's kind of one of those kind of 90s, not grunge, but 90s sounding bands who recorded their own version of it. And I like the Ednaswap version of it much better. I will leave a link to their version down below. And I'm going to ask you a question. Are there songs that you found out that were covers you didn't know were covers? Please leave that in a comment below. Or tell me your favorite cover that you like better than the version by the original artist. I can think almost every song, almost every cover of any song by Bob Dylan is a better version than Bob Dylan's. But anyway, leave me those comments down below. Look forward to your comments, questions, etc. in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.